Welcome, travelers, to my realm of nightmares. Allow me to be your personal assistant. Come in, take a seat, get comfortable. For when you step into my realm, there's no stepping out.
Why are you such a disappointment, James? Mary's son is a lawyer. Did you know that? He has a degree. He went to college. Why could you not have been more like Mary's son? She is so proud of him, and he is such a good boy. He never got into any trouble. James, he always did the right thing, and more importantly, he was successful, unlike you. Why could you not have been more like Mary's son? Please tell me why. Why could you not have been more successful? Why could you not have been a good boy? Why did you have to be you?
She kept talking through the hiss of the static in my hand as I tried my best to ignore her. My mother had always been judgmental of my choices. She had come from a strict Catholic background, and I guess you could say she always had a solid sense of ethics. Ethics of which were just as unwavering as her desire to scold me. She had always been the same, ever since I was a young boy, ever since my father left us. And I guess I always knew it would take more than death to truly slow her down. "Mom, you died over 10 years ago." I softly spoke through the radio, trying my best not to engage her in conversation. "This isn't real." She sighed noticeably through the static, her disappointment somehow stronger than the abrasive noise.
Why could you not have been another boy? Why did you have to be you? You were such a disappointment, such a disgrace. We tried so hard with you, James. We both did. Until the point came when we could not stand your failure any longer. We could just not take your moaning, the whining, and your complaining. Such a prissy little thing. Life was always just a little bit too hard for you, wasn't it? You could not handle the challenge, could you? The conflict, the hardship, the work, anything. It was all just too much for you, wasn't it? Not like Mary's son, though. He was such a good boy. You were the reason your father left, James. Did you know that? You were the reason that your dad walked away. I'm ashamed of you, James. We both are. We are ashamed to call you our son.
My hand shook slightly as I stood at the top of the stairs. "Mom, you're dead. You cannot hurt me anymore." The door had opened softly after I realized that the way out of Drayton had been taken. It had been removed, sealing me within a nightmare of my own design. Something was here tonight, and it wanted to make sure I really felt my past, that I suffer, that it bled. The winding halls and cracked walls at Drayton Pass contained memories, echoes and thoughts, events and feelings. They strained under the weight of their own history, and tonight, through the whisper of wind, as it wound its way through the cracks of the walls, it quickly became apparent that Drayton wanted to talk. However, tonight, as the rain continued to fall heavy from the sky above, and as my deceased mother continued her barrage, it was apparently clear that the walls, well, tonight, they were buckling under the weight of my history.
You could not hurt me more than dying, James. Birthing you, that was worse than death.
I took a moment to compose myself, looking down the darkened staircase that had revealed itself to me. "Why are you doing this?" She laughed maniacally in response.
Oh, my son, are things getting a little too hard for you again? Shouldn't you have already given up by now? Oh, wait, you can't, can you? You have no way out. You are stuck. You are trapped, lost within your own memories, and imprisoned by your own failures. You have really made a mess of this one, haven't you? Mary's son probably would have been better. He would not have gotten trapped in here, that's for sure. Did you know he's a lawyer now? Actually, Do you know what? It has just occurred to me just how liberating it must be for you to be so useless. At least you have nobody who counts on you. Nobody to disappoint. Well, apart from your dear old mother, of course.
Do not give her a reaction. It was too late. My fingers were already squeezing down heavily against the radio as she finished her insult. You are dead. You are ashes. And so are your words. You are nothing but dirt in the wind. This static hissed loudly in response before slowly, after a measure of silence, she carefully uttered her last retort.
Mary's son would not have said that.
Enough with Mary's bloody son. I barely knew him when I was younger. He was just that weird kid down the road. He barely had any friends, and he was essentially, for lack of better words, a loser. I didn't even know what he did with himself after I moved away, but it is clear to me that Mary's son, for all intents and purposes tonight, well, he's having his reputation greatly exaggerated. Mom, for Christ's sake, just shut the hell up for once in your life. I mean, for once in your death. Whatever you are, just shut the hell up, please. I did not give two anythings for Mary's son. Nobody does. Not even Mary at this point. He is just a plot device to accelerate conflict, as are you. So take your wasted words and drift back to whatever corner of hell I sincerely hope you inhabit. Drayton stood still, surprised at my sudden outburst. The static within my hand continued, but no response came, as the hospital seemed to sway in disapproval. Lightning struck heavy above. The clap of thunder which followed almost applauding the sudden appearance of my backbone. The interior of Drayton seemed to darken somewhat, as the staircase in front of me pulled further down into the abyss, welcoming me into the blackness below. If I were to strain my ears, with all of my energy and all of my imagination, I could almost make out 3 words drifting from the hell below. Climbing the stairs and hitting the walls, climbing up towards me in order to greet my ears in an unsettling fashion.
We are waiting.
At this point, the building was just taunting me. Of course, I knew that Drayton had always been waiting. I had felt it the first night after all. I knew that amongst the cobwebs, hidden by the spiders and concealed within the darkness of its corners, that there was a truth that had been hidden, patiently awaiting my presence. But I also knew, whilst looking down into the emptiness that awaited me below, that whatever truth was, whatever was hidden, partially awaiting my arrival, that whatever it was going to be messy. My mouth opened and I allowed an attempt of self-awareness to come. Let's end this. The radio hissed once again as my mother took a chance at a final insult.
I never thought I'd hear you say that.
Screw it. My manager had been trying to tell me the truth all along. He had exposed the ugly nature of it. What am I worth? Here I was, standing above an open doorway within an old abandoned hospital, in front of a staircase leading down to an obviously haunted or possessed basement, about to descend in search of a hidden truth that had physically manifested itself in the form of a haunting. You could not make this up. His words lingered as I took a step downward. I am disposable. I am a cliché. The encroaching shroud of impenetrable darkness barely registered as I continued to move down the stairs. You are no more than a character. Took another step down. A badly written character. And another. A tired and painful resolution awaits you at the bottom. And another. You have no depth. And one more. You are nothing special. It had all happened before, in countless movies, in countless stories, and countless television shows. It had been cemented within the genre. It had been tried and tested over countless years. The tale already existed, and it had existed for longer than time itself. And each time, the protagonist was always so predictable. His history was a question, but his path was obvious. At this point, you could easily predict his final destination, and that, as uncomfortable as a realization as it was, that was me. How depressing. Real life was no more than a story. My life clearly had no substance. The radio hissed again as I took my final step downwards.
James,
He began.
what have I told you?
Anyone but him. Mr. Clark, my teacher.
You should have tried harder, James. Life is not always going to be easy.
Somewhere above me, the ceiling rattled under the weight of the lightning strike.
Bad things will happen if you don't apply yourself.
Things could not get any worse. This hospital had found its voice, and its tone had clearly drawn inspiration from my gag reel. The ghosts of my past had come to play, and they were intent on staying until the early hours of the morning. To a certain degree, I could not really blame them after all. With all the material they had at their disposal, there was so much to say.
Thinking about quitting again, are we, James?
Mr. Clark had always been a stark individual, a man of dire intent, with an even dire advocating for education. He was the epitome of strict, a mess of rules wrapped in an aging, coffee-fueled mess of a man.
I clearly didn't teach you anything, did I?
My hand shook again as the anger consumed me. I must have missed a lesson on demon-infested basements, Mr. Clark. He snickered a guttural laugh as the tone transformed to the hideous voice which had spoken with me before.
End of games, James. What are you waiting for?
The room before me steadily came into focus as the darkness allowed my eyes to adjust. Through the mist of blackness, a corridor appeared. The corridor was narrow in depth, as it was claustrophobic in height. The walls hugged nearly against my shoulders, as the ceiling reminded me noticeably of its height. In front of me, the cloud of nothing seemed to stretch on for an eternity. But somewhere further down, hidden within the shadow, I could just make out a door. With caution, my legs moved forward as the radio continued to berate me. Through the constant torrent of noise, I could tell that Drayton had decided to forego any further luxuries. The voice of Mr. Clark had long been forgotten, and instead, the venomous and violent vocal of the horror communicated without restraint.
We are all waiting for you down here, James. Our eyes have been removed, and our lips are sewn shut. Cut us free, and we will cut you free.
It was all there, on top of me, and pushing me down, suffocating my will, and destroying my resolve. It was the terror. It had always been there, but it was only now, step by step, as I closed the distance towards the door, when I realized just how debilitating it really was. To think about it, I'd assumed the sensation was born through the inception of the situation with Drayton, but within this basement, trapped by the rot and encased within the decay, I knew the terror. It had been with me forever. It was the words of my mother, the put-downs, the disappointment. It was the absence of my father, the longing and wondering. It was Mr. Clark and his steadfast attitude, unable to distinguish the difference between a naughty child and a sad one. It was everything. It was my life, and it was my reality. The terror had followed me forever, and I'd grown accustomed to its touch. However, down within the foundation of Drayton, the terror within my core had been transformed. I could feel it. No longer was it an anchor, a weight which weighed heavily upon my shoulders, but a doorway, a path, a path, a terror I had felt for a lifetime. The terror which had guided me here was steadily being transformed. Although amongst the horror and change, reborn brand new as a guide, a hint and a driving force, which in that moment was guiding me ever closer to a resolution, one of which had been missing from my life for a countless number of years. My mother, my father, Mr. Clark, and so many others. Their words lingered within my ears as I neared the old metal door and carefully pushed it open. Instantly, the sound of metal on metal filled the small hallway. The door was decrepit. The door was old. It was rusted within its frame, and its age spoke loudly as I forcefully moved it open, and then slowly, I made my way into the cold embrace of the room beyond it. What have I done? The room had extended out about 15 or so meters before me. The space that was mostly consumed with archaic rubbish and long-forgotten remnants from a time of its use. Odd-looking instruments lay forgotten on the table, and some lay emphatically upon the ground, each of them lingering way past their time. They were clearly of a medical variety, and even though the haze of black, which seemed to hang around every corner of the small room, I could still see the clearly caked history of blood stained against the surfaces. On either side of the room were an array of numbered drawers built into the walls, each of them sealed with age and a heavy metal, concealing their contents from any eyes which may come prying. It was clear this room was different. It was clear that this room had been waiting. Why am I here? Almost instantly, as soon as the thought had materialized within my mind, a concerto of whispers broke the boundaries of the metal door lining each wall and filled the pitch-black room with a haunting, horrific rasps.
You are here because you want to be here, James.
The sudden break in silence caught me off guard as my heart began to race.
You are home.
Home? It was a construct that I have never really known. After all, I drifted. I drifted through school, I drifted through work, and I drifted through life. Nowhere on this entire planet, not within a social setting, a reliable job, or within a solid home, had I ever actually felt truly at home. My entire life had been a story of horrors, and as I stood there, surrounded by this harsh whisper of nothing coming from within the walls, somehow the irony of it all was somehow too humorous to ignore. I get it, I spoke aloud, my voice carried against the hollow bricks, which held the despair firm. This is where I belong. Real life was random. Real life rarely made sense. And real life was nothing but chance, events, and chaos. But my life was not a real life. It was so clear to me now. My life was nothing but a terribly written horror story. So a hidden meaning trapped within a basement seemed oddly appropriate as I stood within the darkness of Drayton Pass. I belong here. As the thought burned at my mind, an audible sound of creaking broke the silence of my thoughts. It was coming from one of the drawers. There it is. In front of me, about 5 or 6 meters to my right, one of the big metal doors fixed into the wall slowly began to open. The noise of its action grew in intensity as it gathered pace. The large solid door swung noisily against its hinges with a rust-ridden roar. And in that moment, all I could seem to do was watch. I simply watched as the door fell completely open, all by itself, and again, I just watched. I just watched as the gurney housed within the hole behind it slowly began to pull itself free and out from the crypt it had been housed within. It's time. I had come back here for answers. I had come back here for the truth. The hospital had always been here. It had always been waiting, and it had greeted me with a devilish glee the moment that I had re-entered its walls. The plot of my path had driven me here. It was always driving me here, and tonight, deep within the depths of Drayton Pass, to the serenade of the demonic laughter which echoed out from the remaining drawers, I took a step forward, more carefully towards my resolution. The final act was here, and it was sitting on top of the gurney, which had pulled itself free from the space in the wall. The grand finale. The room exploded with a deep, disturbing chorus of cries as I moved towards the cold, metal-looking table.
It is time, James.
I moved closer.
We are here for you.
And another.
We will cut you free.
And one more.
You are home.
The paper shook in my hand as I retrieved it from the cold metal surface. With tears in my eyes, I read the sheet. No, this cannot be true. It was me, or more precisely, the document was about me. It was a patient registration form on it. Clear and crisp, unmistakable within the darkness, were my details. Dissociative tendencies, an unnatural interest in film and television, possible symptoms, a possible memory suspension brought on from multiple instances of intense psychological abuse. James displays a disconnect from his peers, possible personality disorders present. The patient appears to form negative emotions through a narrative or a story, which is clearly constructed to make sense of his suffering. Internal dialogue ongoing. Admission to Drayton Pass is recommended immediately. This cannot be happening. All around me, the hospital continued to laugh from the walls as it rejoiced at the revelation.
Welcome home, James.
Time slowed as the paper shook violently within my hands. This doesn't make any sense. I had memories. I remembered the advertisement. Unique position offered for unique individual. Night Watchmen required urgently, 5 nights a week. The ability to work under your own initiative is a must, as this is a solitary work role. Submit your CV for consideration. I had chosen to respond. I had chosen to be here. Or had I? The memory seemed cloudy, almost as if I was remembering it from a book or a story. Some twisted tale that I had read long ago, standing within the cold basement as the ghost of Drayton continued to mock me. I found that I could no longer discern whether the thought within my mind was a recollection or just a story, a desperate tale thought up by a desperate individual who had somehow become lost within the rain. Without thinking, natural instinct took over, and my legs began to move, just like always, just like so many times in my life, when things got too hard. I did what I had grown accustomed to. I drifted. I drifted forcefully around. I drifted back up the stairs, and I drifted into the hollowed halls of Drayton, desperately seeking a light somewhere within the darkness. I ran, and then I ran some more, my legs moving violently under the weight of the truth, which seemed to be pursuing me down the empty, cold halls. My mind became blank, and my body became unfeeling. I became a shell of a man, a deranged individual moving dangerously through the building, against the overtures of the storm raging above. Memories and thoughts, logic and reason, all of it had escaped me as I ran aimlessly through the halls of Drayton Pass. I had left my sense below. My sensibility had been destroyed by the basement, eradicated by words and destroyed by truth. Nothing within my world made sense anymore, and as I ran screaming through the desolate wings of the hospital, I knew that things would never be the same. The thought consumed me, and it blinded me. I never saw the bucket that still sat waiting patiently for me, hidden within the shadows of the floor, awaiting the approach of my stupidly stupid feet, carrying me stupidly through the night. And just like that, in an instant, I was falling. Gravity was peaceful. The fall was poetic. In that solitary moment, as my body drifted towards the ground, my mind was clean, and my fears were gone. The unexpected action of losing control was almost reassuring. For so long, I tried to rationalize that which had no rationale. I tried to make sense of everything, of my life, of my choices, of the events which had happened to me, of my past, and of my memories. But in that moment, as I flew gracefully towards the ground, I had never felt so free. The sensation, however, only lasted for a second. Almost instantly after came the pain. The air drained from my lungs, and I began to wheeze, exhausted on the ground. The sharp strain within my chest rattled, and the pain was uncomfortable, but it served its purpose. I didn't even notice the beam of light as it fell over me, the torch casting its reassuring glow across my body, cleansing my pain while destroying my fear. "Sir," the young man spoke, the torch dancing with apprehension within his hand. "I am the night watchman here. You cannot be here tonight. Do you have some place to go?" Some place to go? The irony of his words burned through the night and ignited my thoughts. I barely even heard the voice against the radio as he called for assistance on his headset. "Yes, he tripped over the bucket, sir. I don't know how long he's been here. I don't know. I think he's just a drifter. He looks like one. He's just a drifter, sir." A drifter. My story was coming to a close, and it was clear it would be ending in a poetic fashion. I had spent my whole life afraid. I had spent my whole life wandering the world, hiding and pretending. I had spent many years cowering, and I had spent many years running from the truth, and running from the realization that I had so desperately been trying to avoid. Through all my mistakes, Through all my choices, and through all my misplaced actions, I was nothing but a cliche end to an obvious tale. Within life, we have our crosses to bear. In most cases, these crosses are no more than simply acknowledging the people that we are. I had tried to avoid that fact, to hide and cower away from the very knowledge that I was no more than a sum of my existence. We all like to think ourselves unique, but if the truth were to be told, there's always a label stuck on the back of our shirt. In that moment, I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, without even looking and without further contemplation, exactly what my label would read. After all, I was nothing more than a two-dimensional character, a loser, a drifter, and finally, after so many years, I was home. Tonight's story was the epic finale of the Night Watchmen by the talented Raymond Beeman. I want to give a huge thank you to my good friend Ak Feniks for doing all the sound sculpting on all three of these parts. Thank you so much, AK. Without you, this story would not have come to life the way it did, and I greatly appreciate it. You did an amazing job on all three parts. Also, if you'd like to walk around representing my realm and gaining new travelers, the links to my merch store will be in the description below. As always, I'd like to give a huge thank you to all my lovely Patreons. 242 Reads, Pam, Seraphine the Midnight Bard, Creepy Clown Girl, Mia Mina, Philia Noctis, Hair-Raising Narratives, and Spooky Boo's Scary Story Time. If you'd like to join these lovely travelers by the light of my fire, you can do so by becoming a Patreon. The support is always appreciated, but never expected. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ding that bell for all future notifications, as it really helps to push this video out to the algorithm.
But as always, travelers, once you step into my realm, there's no stepping